We got warm hands for last night. You're thinking that this like heat wave is over, but oh yeah, next weekend is it's like high 50s. But then the lows are like 30.
Oh. Okay.
Hey, Simon.
Oh, there's a bit of a lag on that.
Yeah.
All right. So is everyone? So Kathy, Kevin, Maddie, Simon, Marion. Anyone else that we're waiting on that we know is going to be here from exec?
Oh gosh, it's weird lag.
So sorry. So we have everybody. We have everybody here, or
We're waiting on Kathy.
we're waiting on Kat. Okay. Well, we can just get started. So has everyone started looking through the proposal already? Maddie had sent that I linked in the
Hey,
agenda.
Day, can you give us 1 second?
Yeah?
The audio is doing a weird loop.
Sorry.
That's weird.
Sounds like
so.
our side is delayed, but his isn't.
Yeah, and then it keeps playing our side.
Okay.
And his
Do you have the video open on the same, like with the volume up
Oh yeah,
and
that
also the
that's it.
Hangout? Yeah. So when you have the YouTube
Okay,
video
I
link
have-
open,
yeah, I
you have to
fixed it.
mute it.
I fixed it. I had like multiple tabs open on the video. All right, I think we're good now.
All right. Cool. So so it looks like we have a bit of an issue with this extra funding. So I mean, the thing is, she's an artist with a disability. I really want to make sure she gets her money. It's just gonna be some more legwork for us. We're already planning on appealing for more funding anyway, because the cost of the ASL interpreters is going to be higher than we thought. So we can include the 191 in that appeal, I would think. Hey, Kathy.
Hi.
Yeah. So when we appeal for funding from SOFC for the ASL interpreters, we can also appeal for funding for this 191. That Barbara Barnes has requested. The turnaround time, though, I think is going to be the real issue, because first of all, SFC, or the finance office, the people that process the checks, they don't send those out until after the event, typically.
Mm-hmm.
The way that we maybe could do it is do the P card, basically if we get the approval for the 191 from SOFC when we appeal, which is not 100% set in stone. So if we get that money, we can just have it go directly to our account, and we can purchase everything she needs through the P card. That's just going to be a lot more work for us. So we need to make sure that we can actually do it, because I know that we're all very busy, and sometimes it takes us a while to get things done. So we just need to think about that and figure out who exactly is going to be able to make those purchases and when we're going to be able to make those purchases, and then also go through the appeal process as soon as possible. The one other thing I think we're waiting on, so the one thing I wanted to do before we send an email to Jackson Dellinger telling him we want to appeal is that I want to send a proposed cost scheme for the ASL interpreters to SDAO, so that we're both on the same page as to what exactly the cost and where the cost is going to come from. So basically, it's going to be something like I texted you yesterday, Marion, where we have times 4 hours times like the $75 per hour cost, and then for the deaf and blind for Antoine Hunter, that would be 11 and 12.
Yeah, I think that
50,
DT emailed that to us, so I can get that from. I just have to log into my email. You're asking what the
So I think what we want to So you remember, Marion, what I texted you yesterday? I had basically the two regular interpreters times 4 hours times 75, and then two deaf and blind interpreters times the 112.5 times 5 hours.
Right.
And then so just adding all of that up, it comes to about 1725. And so just confirming that number with SDAO, and also making sure they're going to need the regular interpreters from probably about 12 to 4, because people are going to start coming in at 12, and then it'll be over at 4. And then
Sorry, everyone.
for Antoine Hunter, we want it. So then for Antoine Hunter, we want 11:30. When we all arrive there to like pack up after the event and everything. So that's where those numbers were coming from. So if we can just get an email drafted, have that sent out by Monday, and just confirm that with STO, I think then we can go.
Okay.
And also inform them he doesn't need an interpreter outside of the event itself. So if we can draft an email with those two things, send that and make sure that we're all on the same page with them, then I think we can go ahead and email Jack and tell him that we want to appeal and why. It would be this coming Wednesday, I guess, which is actually going to be a problem I had scheduled in the interview. Anyway, but yeah, so the hearing will hopefully be this coming Wednesday. So I'll CC Duke Disability Alliance on the email that I send, or if someone else ends up sending the email, just CC Duke Disability Alliance. That way everyone knows when it's going to be. Okay, so we got 3 minutes left. I think that's all that I wanted to say about this in terms of the funding. Did anyone else have anything to add about the proposal?
So in terms of just the type of thing that she's like proposing for what exactly she's gonna do, so would it be feasible for her to have a table where she can present her art like that, and then also have her live sketching during the dance performance?
So we actually need to contact the museum again to talk about the display table, because that's something that I asked during our phone call like a month ago. And they said, at first they were like, oh yeah, definitely we can have a table on the third pavilion. And then one of them was like, oh wait, maybe not, because they can't remember like what other displays they've got going on at that time. So that was something that we were gonna come back to. So now that we know exactly what Barbara's requesting, we should call them again and talk it through.
Right.
And I think, I really hope we can. I think it's a great idea to have her work on display, either on a table set up or on easels. So, when you spoke to her, was she suggesting that she's gonna bring like her own table, or what were those costs that she was breaking down?
So I think these things are only for the art that would go on top of the table
Okay.
display.
Okay, yeah, that's good.
I actually don't know if she is planning on like bringing table or beer.
Sorry about that.
No, I'd say we should.
So yeah,
I mean, I'm sure the Asher has plenty of folding tables.
okay.
Let's see. So real quick, I think we can spend a few more minutes on this and run a bit behind schedule because this is important. So Maddie, you'll get back to Barbara Barnes that we just talked about. We're going to consider doing the P card, but first we have to appeal for funding. So if we appeal for funding and we get it, and then we'll get back in touch with her. So if you can email her about that, that'd be great.
Okay.
Sound good?
Mm-hmm.
And then
And we should also.
and I guess Marion, would you be able to email the Nasher back about the?
Yeah, I'll just write to Liz.
And the other thing is we probably want to go see the space at some point. So
Yes.
I don't know if we can start working on that.
Yeah, I'm already kind of working with her on time when I can go with her, and if anyone else wants to
Oh,
check out.
okay, yeah.
With
We're
Yeah, so we'll just need to CC the Nasher on that then. And just make sure that whatever time we want to go works for them, and that's in the space at that time that we want to go. Let's see. So And then Deepti is not here, but we'll just need to confirm with her that she like you, and then she can send that, and then we can get confirmation from them. Hopefully I can talk to Trent, and then either he or I will draft the email to Jackson Dellinger, which we'll send out after we get confirmation from SDAO. Is someone taking notes on all this?
Sounds good.
Someone-
Can you possibly like get the display?
Yeah, that's
Is
what
that
I don't know if anybody sees an HDMI cord around.
Oh.
Cause like,
I can see
There's
if I
no-
can get one over there to you guys. If
an HDMI cord?
Someone from IT.
I mean, we can snag one over there if you don't mind me.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Alright,
Yeah.
I'm gonna go see if anybody
Might be
has.
helpful to be able to see the people on the chat.
Yeah, all you're hearing is like some.
I see. Hi Kathy, and I think Ashley might be trying to get on there as well.
so, let's see. So so later. So we still have more planning to do after this to leave before 11:45, or like after 11:45. Except for Maddie, of course.
Sorry?
All right, so we're all good to stay after once we get all the
Yeah,
GBM stuff done. We can talk a bit more.
I can stay later.
Okay. Because yeah, we do need to talk about the flyers, get the contracts
Jay,
filled out if
I
possible.
actually can stay.
Oh, okay, great.
Okay.
Let's see.
Yeah, so I guess we can all speak to this stuff later then. Okay, so let's get started. So, if we can go around and do introductions, I just need to send the Hangout link to our guest.
Oh, I did that.
We're gonna have.
Jay. I sent
Sorry?
it out to the general body.
Well, yeah, no. Well, for this guy, I don't think this guy's on our list here, so.
Alright. I can.
So from exec can start with the introductions, please. You can
Okay.
just say your name and say like something good from the week, or like you can start the trend, like whatever theme you want to do.
Okay, so my name's Kevin. I'm the vice president of the DDA. Something good from the week is kind of an odd question. I found out I was selected as a finalist for one of the fellowships I was applying to for the
Oh
summer.
my
so
god!
we're
Congratulations!
super stoked about that. Thanks.
That's so exciting.
you.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, my name's Karina Heaton. I'm in Dr. Q's Writing 101 class, and something good from the week is I got my internship for the summer. Very exciting.
Oh my gosh, everyone has good news.
I'm Maddie. I'm also a Writing 101 student, and a little less thrilling, but I got a Shamrock Shake yesterday.
Nice.
I'm also Maddie, and I'm an advocacy co-chair for DDA. And something that happened to me this week was going to a basketball game on Monday.
I'm also Maddie.
Yeah, but in class I call you Madison or something.
Okay, I'll do that. That sounds good to me. I'm also in Dr. Q's Writing 101 class, and I'm going to the game today.
I'm Georgia. I'm in Dr. Q's writing class, and my sister's in town this weekend, so yeah.
I'm Molly. I'm also a Writing 101 student. And spring break is only 1 weekend away after this weekend.
Oh my god, there's so much to do before then. I'm Marion, some of you know me as Dr. Q. I guess for me, a good thing about this week is that I'm going roller skating tonight, this roller prance thing that my friend Mike is DJing at.
For sure.
My name is Sarah. I took Dr. Q's writing class last semester, and I guess one good thing about this week is that like the worst of midterm season is over.
I'm Kate. I'm in Dr. Q's writing class. And one good thing that happened to me this week was I had a really big paper that I worked on like all week long, and now I'm done with it.
Simon, I'm gonna go source some more chairs. You've got like standing room only.
Oh my god. I am not.
Wowzers. Yeah, I'll just roll some out.
We
And if you you guys still need an HDMI cable?
Yeah, we do actually, because we can't see you.
Just give me 1 second. Let me see if I can get that to you.
Oh, okay.
I can send somebody over me.
Is it gonna like fall from the sky?
Jay, where would you get an HDMI? Would it just be from the OIT? Because I can just run over there.
I have one in my dorm, so I can see if I can get someone to send that to you.
Oh, okay.
Give me 1 second. Give me.
I think there's more than that. And it's OIT. It's right.
No, it's in downstairs.
Oh, I don't know that. I mean, we can continue with introductions.
Yeah, we got some new introductions to do.
Oh, also, sorry, I forgot to mention, if you guys don't want to be filmed, you can always come sit behind the camera. So you have that option. So you guys want to introduce yourselves?
Sure. Hi, I'm Sydney. I'm a freshman and I'm currently in Dr. Carucci's Writing 101 for neurodiversity.
Hi, I'm Anisha. I'm also a freshman and I'm also in Dr. Q's writing class.
We reserved enough time to talk about the activism projects.
But dang.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for being Yeah. Anyone introduce themselves?
Agenda. Sorry.
Okay, so the next thing on the agenda is doing a Disability Pride Week update for the general body. Is that? Oh, okay. Thanks, Maria.
Hello again, guys.
So, what can we update you on? I guess Jay, do you want me to run the update for the sponsor meeting since I was there for the whole thing yesterday?
Oh, that was on first? Okay, yeah, let's do that.
I mean, do you think that we should put the activism projects first instead, or what do you think?
Cause, hold on. Dave, are you here?
No, there's nobody from DSG.
There's someone that says
here.
Duke.
Yeah.
DSG is here. I think that's Dev. Okay,
Oh, you mean?
yeah, we can go ahead and switch that.
Yeah.
Do that first.
Okay.
So.
Yeah. Oh.
Okay, but yes. And here's DT. Oh my god.
Oh my gosh.
You might even
You should have assigned this.
Yeah, I know. That would have. But I have 36 students, so there's we'll do the activism project at the top of the agenda.
Someone sign
Talk about the
Olivia?
sponsor meeting
Is that what she in your class?
Sorry?
Is there an Olivia in your class?
Yes, sorry.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, she's
on the hangout.
on the
Okay,
yeah.
great.
Great. Please.
So which was the first? I was gonna talk about the DSG resolution first, right?
You can, yeah. I mean, that was. Yeah, go ahead.
So just real quick, on Wednesday I went to speak to DSG Senate and resolution imploring the board to make the languages building accessible. It's currently non-accessible, like completely inaccessible building on campus. So that's great that they passed that. It's a great first step. And it's going to be forwarded to Bianca, the DSG president, and she's going to get it to the board. So I think that's a great first step again. And then secondly, here we have I don't know if you can introduce yourself, Dev. He's the DSG judiciary chair, is that it?
Here.
I don't know if you heard us say, Jay, that the person from DSG is not in the meeting right now, unless they're on the hangout. But
there is someone from Duke though?
No, nobody's here from DSG.
Oh wait. Okay, hold on. All right. So then, sorry about that. I misheard you guys. So we can wait on that and talk about the sponsor meeting. Let me see if.
Do you wanna just go ahead with that?
Yeah, I think it makes sense since there's so many of my students here right now that we should do the activism project discussion at the top of the agenda and save the other stuff for the end.
Sorry. I misheard you, so.
Oh, it's okay. Yeah, it's kind of hard for you to be running the meeting remotely, I think. So we'll start with Molly Monser, who's next to me here. And yeah, if you want to just tell us what your project is, and we can all kind of give you some feedback.
Okay, so I'm doing a video, and currently I have it set up so that I start kind of describing some statistics about the correlation between mental health and homelessness in the US. And then I go into reading a few blog posts from blogs that I found from people who suffer from mental illness and are living in poverty or homelessness. And so I have 3 accounts of that. And then in the video, I have like 3 photos of the people speaking, and like when I'm speaking, I describe like what the photo is so that people who have like visual impairments can kind of imagine what I'm talking about. And then after that, I have interviews with 3 undergraduate dean students, and I ask them a few questions about like their views on people who are homeless with mental illnesses and like their stereotypical views of those people and how they would react when they see those people on the streets. And then I ask them what they think the percentages of people who are mentally ill and homeless, and then I ask them how they think we should increase resources for the resource availability for these groups of people. So I have 3 interviews on that, and then the last part of my video just analyzes the fact that like a lot of Duke undergraduates know about this population, but they are very open to like increasing the amount of mental health resources available to the homeless population.
So that sounds like a really fabulously like kind of put together idea for like what the video is. So I think we can make the best use of our time by talking about ways to distribute that and share it. So does anyone have ideas about like where could Molly get done that before, like get a lot of visibility around that project?
Isn't there like a film that DDA is gonna have a bunch of film, like a film?
Yeah, we are. Yeah, so this is not one of the ones from the series. So she's working on her own, and so I'm hoping to organize like an exhibition with the other professor, the video professor, to showcase those ones. And I mean, we can maybe. I'm hoping that exhibition will be something that I can expand so that there's like all of the other visual art that people are creating for these projects can be like part of the same event. I'm not sure yet where I'm gonna host this. We can talk about that amongst ourselves. We can DDA exec can figure something out, like a good location, and you guys and my students can help figure out like how do we get a lot of student traffic to that event. I mean, like friends obviously, but how can we like advertise it more effectively? So yeah, I mean, we could show a video in an exhibition like that, but I mean, even prior to like a physical exhibition, like.
I just know my video is not professional at all because I can't do technology whatsoever. So literally, iMovie told me what to do, and I like plugged stuff in and did voiceovers. So I just wouldn't want it to look super unprofessional next to those. But my current idea right now would be, so I live in Bassett, so it would just be to put it in the common room and put in like the Bassett group message, like, hey, I'm showing this video, like, I'd love if you guys would come and watch it. If you can't come to the showing, here's a link to it. Just because I do think they'll get more out of it from watching it actually on a screen, just because you're more inclined to pay attention when you're in a room watching it. But I would also, if they can't make it, I would love for them to watch it on their own time.
Yeah, and I would be open if you shared it with me. I would share it with my group.
Yeah, and that would be awesome.
Yeah.
I think it'd also be good, there's a mental illness alliance on campus called NAMI, and they can send it to all their members and they might be really interested. And also, since it intersects with homelessness, the Coalition for Alleviating Poverty, CAP, could also send to them and they can send to their people. And both of them might be able to traffic more people for you.
Awesome. And you could be even more ambitious and just think about like beyond Duke, what homelessness advocacy organizations can you link it up to, what mental illness advocacy organizations can you share with, and like, I don't know, through Twitter, which is really powerful, you can like tweet, like find the right accounts to tweet to, you know what I mean, and like tag and tweet,
I don't have a Twitter, but
yeah,
I'll make one.
you can, yeah, and but Twitter, I don't know, Twitter's a lot of work, right? I mean, like if you have like a purpose with your Twitter account where you want to be getting certain people to see a thing, you have to like figure out who those accounts are, and that takes some time, right? But it is a national, it's like a nationally,
And I volunteer somewhere that works a lot with the homeless population, so I can ask them about uploading it to their website too.
Yeah.
I don't know how strict they are about what they upload to their website, or if it's like national, but I'll ask them about it.
How long is it?
12 minutes.
Okay, so it's almost like a mini documentary then.
Yeah, because I didn't want it, because like my target audience was like Duke students, and I know no Duke student has time to sit and watch a 20-minute video made by like another student, so I was trying to keep it like under 15.
Yeah. The videos that we're making with the AMI students, those are like 5 and under, right?
Oh, really?
But like, you can, when you have the editing skills and stuff, like we're learning about ways of like saying a lot really short and like, just like through like editing.
Yeah, the longest part of my video is definitely the interviews, just because like I can't.
Yeah.
Do much of that.
Yeah. And so yeah, if you send something to DDA, Duke Disability Alliance at duke.edu, we'll definitely get that sent out, whatever it is.
Okay.
Yeah. And that goes for everybody. If you have anything like a description of your project, if you need to find people to interview, we can definitely share that if you send it to Duke Disability Alliance at duke.edu. So, yeah.
Should we move to the next person?
Dr. Q,
Oh, sorry.
the DSG, Dev has joined the Hangout, so maybe we could do that real fast.
Okay, well. Alright.
Does he like only have like a certain window of time that he can?
I'm not sure, but.
Okay, so who has to leave soon?
I have to leave by about 12.
Okay.
12:15. I have like
12 is when the meeting should wrap up by, so. Why don't we quickly hear from Dev and then move back to the activism projects.
Yeah. So Dev, thanks so much for
Hey,
coming.
y'all,
I don't know. Sorry.
There's Dev.
Oh, can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Am I there? Okay. Hi, my name is Dev. I'm a Trinity senior, and I'm the Chief Justice of the Duke Student Government. And one of the things that we just had a case about was something called something that they phrase as disability discrimination, but what it came down to was that there's a Bill of Rights in the DSG Constitution, and specifically look at like Article 9. There are a lot of rights around equal protection and also the freedom from discrimination, and the protected class actually is disability. And the way that we interpreted and applied that particular clause was that essentially that the KVIL line monitors are required to have a reasonable accommodation statement in their policy. However, the broader implication of that is that all clubs and organizations are required to have a reasonable accommodation notice. And I could also parse through a little bit of the details. There is a difference between an impairment and a disability and someone regarded as having a disability, especially when you look at like ADA and the ADA amendment. And this is something that I cleared with SDAO, and we have like a legal office that essentially focuses on disability law. So this is also not just something coming from a bunch of undergraduate students in robes. This is something coming from people who actually do this. And I just wanted to sort of present the case, answer any questions that you might have, and also consider working on a white paper or some kind of statement or some kind of like template policy that clubs and DSG could adopt that would provide like the necessary notice on reasonable accommodation that students would need. And the reason this is like particularly important is, to be honest, I think that if we went through like every single club's constitution or their documentation, almost no one probably actually has this language. And I think that it's probably a better solution to just tell people like, okay, here is like something that's been vetted by everyone on campus. All stakeholders have looked at this and said this reasonable accommodation notice makes sense. And so that way clubs can just incorporate it, as well as maybe some language or like a pamphlet on how do you actually apply the reasonable accommodation notice? How do you actually interpret the law in practice?
Yeah, I'm really excited about this. Everything you're saying, this is awesome. Feedback from exec?
Sorry?
I'm just asking our executive board how they feel about collaborating on a white paper.
Sounds great. I like the idea.
Ashley Elrod, could you expand on the line monitors that you mentioned? What is that?
Oh yeah. So for the Duke Carolina game, students have to tent in Kville, and so they could spend up to 6 weeks living in a tent outside for the game. And there's actually like a huge policy around it. It's a 42-page document that sort of regulates exactly how people can stand in line. And the line monitors are essentially like Kville police who enforce the policy. And so it turns out that the policy right now doesn't have a reasonable accommodation notice, which is kind of a problem if you have 1,200 students sitting in tents in Kville for like 6 weeks in the cold.
Right.
And so I believe it was I read an article about the ruling, I think, in the Chronicle, where it was like there was students with a hearing disability that couldn't hear the megaphone when it was time to come out for tent checks or something. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I think one of the things that we looked at was that there was a tenter or two tenters who had a hearing disability. I think our interpretation is a little bit more broad than that, because I think through the entire process of Kville, there are a lot of points where we could see that if somebody has or needs essentially a reasonable accommodation, that they would not have the mechanism by which to do so. And I think that's sort of the language that we're interpreting in, is that we care specifically about a reasonable accommodation. Like that's sort of what we want to get at.
I think it's a really great idea. Yeah, that clubs and organizations need to have like some training and some like a pamphlet. I think would be really helpful. So yeah, I really appreciate that DSG is just getting interested in this and is devoting, time out of the work that you guys do to promoting these resolutions. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. We definitely appreciate that. I just have a few questions. So first of all, what commitment do you have from SDO to help with the initiative of the white paper? Because I know it is their job to make sure that that students have the accommodations they need. So I think this would definitely be in their purview to be the primary ones developing this white paper. I think there are many ways in which SDO, unfortunately, I would say quite bluntly, they sometimes tend to do the bare minimum. Which, I mean, perhaps from a legal standpoint, that's okay. But from the standpoint of people with disabilities, like oftentimes like that, like again, what SDO does is can sometimes be the bare minimum, and they and may not be the best scenario for people with disabilities. So I think it's great that you've come to us as well. And we'll definitely want to give feedback on whatever's developed. But again, I think that because SDO, it's their job to make sure that everyone is accommodated, that they could hopefully be the primary ones developing the white paper.
So basically, I think I see sort of like two parts to this, where one is the actual like legal language essentially that would be required of clubs and other organizations, and that also extends to Kville policy. Like we want to develop a reasonable accommodation policy that the line monitors can use, because quite frankly, it's not like the line monitors didn't do their job. It's just that, to a certain extent, I think DSG sort of dropped the ball on this, like Senate and the exec, because they didn't provide an adequate policy. So as like the judiciary's main job is to protect and defend student rights. So I just want to make sure that this particular area of student rights doesn't go unnoticed, and that we develop the correct language around it to actually be legally enforceable. And then on top of it, I want that to have that accompanied by some like readable plain text language around what does that actually look like in practice. So that way, it doesn't require a lawyer or someone of DSG to come down and explain, like exactly what it is that we're trying to communicate with this legal language. Because there's certain legal language that's required of like by like ADA or something. And like, to be honest, like even though I'm in judiciary, but I'm also like an undergraduate student. Like I want to talk to the disability lawyers before clearing any legal language that gets put in anywhere. But then it would be nice to accompany that with like just a 1-page, pamphlet or something like that. Something that's just like very digestible, very easy to understand, very easy to read, that says, okay, like here's the legal language, but okay, what does this actually mean? Like here's what this would look like in practice.
Right. Yes, I don't know what anyone else at the meeting or an exec thinks about this, but I think the thing with going to SDEO first is that, or at least some point in the process of developing any sort of informational pamphlet, is that there's the potential for a conflict between the office and whatever student is receiving an accommodation or whatever organization is providing the accommodation. There can often there can be situations where SDEO deems something as going too far, whereas the student or the organization may not. So I think it's important to definitely involve them in the process and just make sure that like to be able to kind of preempt any sort of conflict where something like some accommodation is put in place and then SDO is like, no, you can't do that. So yeah, but yeah, I think DDA was definitely willing to give feedback though. So I think if you can involve us and them, I think that'd be good.
Okay, that sounds excellent. And the other sort of, just as a note, we the judiciary did like formally launch something called the Office of Public Advocacy, whose sole responsibility is to take student rights issues and advocate for them, whether that looks like going to administration or talking to other student groups or bringing it to DSG. We will have somebody in OPA who specializes in like disability issues. So that's another thing where if y'all have like if y'all have someone that you think would be perfect for this role and you want to like have them liaise with OPA or put them on OPA directly, like I think that'd also be fantastic, because we want people to have like good subject matter expertise. So that way if there's a student who feels uncomfortable like interfacing with SDAO or any other part of campus, they can have someone who's informed and who has more like institutional clout, essentially like the institutional clout of DSG, to be able to make those arguments on their behalf.
Yeah, that's great, because then I think that helps avoid this kind of impasse where SDO says something is not possible and then students don't have the means to kind of to push back against that. So I think that's great that you have that, and we can definitely advertise to our listserv that there is a position open to do that sort of thing. And so yeah, we can definitely get that out to our listserv, and if we hear back from anybody, we'll let you know for sure. Yeah. Does anyone else there have any thoughts about like something to make sure to include in these materials?
I have a follow-up comment about translating legal requirements into pragmatic, usable information. Some of our advocacy partners within the community kind of do that as their bread and butter, especially Disability Rights North Carolina might be interested in helping us with that, since legal advocacy is their primary activity, and that they could maybe have a look at the materials and provide advice. But it sounds like I'm really excited to hear about this forthcoming project. I'm interested to know kind of what the next steps might be that we can expect to hear about.
So was that a question?
Yeah. What
I might have missed.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, I think it just might be cutting out. I apologize.
So my question is, what is the next step for each of these items that you raised?
So the first thing that I want to do is I want to figure out the actual legal language that needs to go into club documents and needs to go into the cable policy. And one of the things that we're doing right now internally is we're doing something basically institutional review on all like 126 pages of DSG like rules and policy, to make sure that there aren't other gaps. And the important like hole that I want to plug right now is this gap where we don't have a reasonable accommodation notice anywhere in DSG policy. So I want to develop that language. I want to clear that by SDAO because they have disability lawyers. I'd love to run it by y'all. So if I basically want to get all stakeholders to look at this document. So the first thing would be the legal document itself, to make sure that we're compliant with the judiciary's most recent ruling. And then the next step after that would be to somehow, figure out the best way to get and I'm also just spitballing when I said like a one-page pamphlet. Like if there are other media that you think that would be way more effective in getting this material out to students, I just said pamphlet as kind of like a starting point. I'm to work on and provide resources for whatever sort of material you think would be most effective to taking that sort of in legal terms, like how to implement that in practice. So I would see that the policy itself, like the legal language, I want to develop fairly fast because it's sort of like a large omission. So probably in the next 2 weeks, we'll have draft language ready to go that's been vetted internally that we'll send out to SDAO and we can send out to you.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Awesome. So is there anything else anyone wants to say on that? Or I guess we'll just wait to hear back from the judiciary then.
Yeah. That sounds great.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
And please let me know if you have any questions. Feel free to reach out. Jay, I'll send you my email address so that way y'all know.
Okay, great. And then if you wouldn't mind sending us a description of that position that you were talking about, we can just send that out to our listserv.
Okay, I'll get that out today to you. Thank you so much.
Okay, great. Thank you. And you can email Duke Disability Alliance at duke.edu. That'll get to all of execs. So.
Okay, awesome. Will do.
All right, great. Thank you so much.
Cool. Thank you.
All right, bye. Awesome.
Yeah. Sorry, everybody.
We'll just keep going this direction. You already did. Yeah. Okay. Cool. We'll just move to
It's actually.
Okay. So can you read that or something?
Oh, that's so funny. Actually.
All right. Yeah. Actually, I don't know. I don't know if you can just use headphones or something.
Oh, I'm so sorry. There was
Absolutely.
background noise. It might be the road behind me. Yeah, I'm gonna.
Thank you, Ashley.
So, my activism project so far is, I'm thinking about, it's kind of about awareness of different mental illnesses, I think. Or, I kind of have 2 different directions I can go with that. I can either do that route, or I can do kind of it's gonna be for Duke students, a student outreach, more about self-care and mental state, I'd say, and stress and things like that. And my idea is basically we're gonna make a lot of little bags full of items that hopefully appeal to college students. And some of them are gonna be the typical journals or inspirational quotes and stuff like that, and tea. But then also typical relaxation stuff, but also resources that people have at Duke that most people know about, but still just to see them again. And also I thought little items with kind of dual meanings. So everybody loves those not cheap, cool neon sunglasses. But if you put a tag on them that says see the person, not the stigma, or something like that. Have dual meanings. So, and then I was going to distribute them. I don't know tabling outside marketplace, or I didn't know if I went a different route with it, maybe to give them to CAPS, and when people leave CAPS, they could pass them out.
So one thing about that, we are going to be reaching out to PICAP, Personally Pride Week, and so we usually table with them and get people to sign up for our Accessibility Matters Day that we do. So if you want to have whatever you plan on giving out, if you want to just give those to the people that are tabling, then we can kind of distribute them that way if that works for you.
Okay, yeah. Would that be during disability?
Yeah. We'll be getting the details on that soon. Yeah, exec will talk about it today.
Okay.
I think it's a really interesting medium to think about, like gift baskets. I'm wondering how you're paying for it, because like I don't want
budget.
students to have to pay with their own money to create, like, you know what I mean, like.
Yeah, I think I just like budget the same amount that I'd need like if I made a really nice poster.
Okay, yeah, I mean, cause like the thing with, I don't want you to be like buying these expensive gift baskets and like giving them to Duke, you know what I mean, like how many can you really afford to make, and like, how many like, does that then limit your ability to reach more people? You know, so I would think about like having maybe a few gift baskets like as a symbolic kind of part of it, right? But perhaps like the larger part of your project could be enabling a discussion that is critical of the aspects of our culture that create those conditions of stress that, you know, all the things about Duke, like for me, like what is the number one like word I would use to describe Duke students, and it's like stressed or overextended. Like those are the two, and I really relate to that here. And I think you can just kind of use your project and your tabling time and all that to like raise awareness about those like cultural conditions here, and how can students resist that culture and do that self-care thing. Another thing it reminds me of is from Parks and Rec, the treat yourself days. That's what it gets me thinking of. But I think the more important thing is the conversation that it starts, and the criticisms of the culture of stress and competition.
Okay, and so could I, talk to people when I table with you guys, like, and also maybe make a poster, like.
Yeah, it might be good. I'm just trying to make this affordable for you, because like, what are you gonna make, like 1,000 gift baskets, you know?
Yeah, no.
Like, well, thousands. But yeah, like how many can you reasonably?
I wish, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and then my other question was just how to maybe make it more accessible. I'm not gonna put food in it because of people with allergies, and I'm gonna try to keep them like non-gendered, so it doesn't matter. Not like, oh, I got nail polish, what am I gonna do with this? Like, no. I was gonna keep it non-gendered as well, but just like any other ideas you guys have.
I like the idea of not having it gendered. And in terms of the self-care products that you might be including, go scent-free, right? Because there's something called environmental illness that some people have, which, it would be intense like reactions to scented products.
Okay.
So, scent-free is one thing.
Yeah, it might be easier when you have an idea of what kind of things you might want to include in the gift baskets. You can just send exec that list, and then we can get back to you about like accessibility concerns with any of the items you've chosen. Does that sound good?
Yeah, thank you.
Cool. Okay, Maria and Lourdes, you want to present together since you're working together?
Sure. Yeah, I just wanted to mention also an option for like glasswares.
What is it?
Like for the big gift baskets, like options for glassware versus we can.
Oh, maybe you could give them to a friend.
Pass on the self-care.
Yeah.
Oh, sure. So, Maria and I are working together, and we're doing a video, and it's going to be about addiction, and the main point, I guess, that we want to get across is that we need a peer support system here at Duke. So that's, yeah.
Yeah, so right now we've been brainstorming ideas for a video, and it seems really cool at this point. So what we have in mind is just showing addiction in all of its forms, and sort of like all of the places where you can see it on campus, and making it not seem like this really isolated issue that only affects a very specific group of people. Addiction is a very commonplace thing. It's one of those inconvenient facts that we don't really love to acknowledge within our society, but it does exist, and it doesn't need to be like a stereotypical, I'm addicted to alcohol, I'm addicted to drugs. People can be addicted to a wide range of things, and addiction does exist at Duke. So we really want to focus on legitimizing it as a mental health illness, establishing that it's a problem here at Duke, but kind of steering away from pushing through or like, passing any judgment on it. We really just want to sort of place it in this context and then talk about the ways we can improve it. Like, there doesn't have to, addiction at Duke doesn't have to look that way. Like our communities can be more supportive, and by spreading awareness, we can get closer to that place. We also plan to highlight other universities that have implemented really cool, effective programs that help people who suffer or deal with addiction, or those that are affected by addiction, but don't necessarily partake in it, I guess.
Yeah, so by doing that, we're providing suggestions to our community, because we can't just say, oh, we need a peer support system, but have no ideas for a solution. Because we're not gonna, they're not gonna figure it out on their own.
So I actually just want to say this connects with some shared goals that DDA has already, right? So we had our exec orientation last fall, and we started just talking about what do we want this club to be, what are our longer term goals, and an idea that the students came up with that I hadn't thought of previously was the idea of creating a cultural center for disability on campus, right? Something like the Center for Sexual and Gender Diversity, but for disability and mental health issues on campus. So I don't know if you guys wanted to talk about like what you had in mind for that, or what you think that might look like, and like share your ideas with Maria and Lourdes, so that could be the kind of thing that they ultimately are proposing in their video.
Yeah. So I think like Marian, like you said, it's basically like I was thinking that it would be something kind of like the CSGD and the Bryan Center, a space where people with disabilities can go and like if they're going through something, people that they can talk to that like kind of understand what they're going through, like a place where they can feel accepted, a place where they can feel like they have a home on campus, and also a center that kind of takes this activism work that DDA is doing and kind of runs with it, and so that us as like we as students don't have to be the ones doing all of that work, and basically that then becomes somebody's job to help like fight for people with disabilities on campus in the larger sense of like in a social sense, because SDAO they've told me it's not in their purview to provide a community for people with disabilities, so this is what that center would then fill that need. Yeah. So I don't know if anyone else in exec can expand on that, but
I think it would, I mean, this is kind of unrelated to Mary Buckridge, but so I was talking to this one girl, she said that she met a lot of her friends through, I forgot what it's called, but it's for Latin American students, and so that's where all her friends are now, and I think it'd be cool. No, it was something for admissions that like you can visit before coming to Duke. Yeah, that. And so I think that it would be cool if we have a single event just to get it started, so that way the whoever wants to attend, they can get to know each other and make new friends. And then I think once that happens, I think it'd be easier to get people to go to whatever center is created. Because yeah, I would be nervous that people wouldn't show up really, because one, they don't know about it, but two, maybe they don't want to be seen as like somebody with a disability or something. So.
Yeah, that's the challenge. When we make a center like this, what the purpose of it is to destigmatize something that's stigmatized, right? And so I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. In terms of the like, there's like CSGD has like a secret entrance and everything. So I think there are some options there in terms of like getting people to open up, but in a private manner where they feel safe doing that. But yeah, so in this video then, I don't know if you want. Yeah, when you do research into the other universities that have created cultural support centers, if you also want to draw attention to the fact that we're trying to create a center for students with disabilities, I think that'd be great.
Definitely.
But yeah.
That's definitely what we want to end with. Like, here are all these other institutions that are implementing these types of programs or these types of societies, and we should kind of follow their example and create something that is our own and that is as effective. I have noticed that a lot of other universities have like very kind of like communities or support groups that are tailored to very specific groups of people. So there's like, like a support group for you know, people with autism on campus, or, you know, very like specific populations. And I feel like what you're saying about what you're trying to implement is really neat in that it is very broad, so it doesn't, you know, I think that's a good place to start.
Okay, great. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely excited to see how that video turns out, and yeah, let us know if you need anything else from exec. Again, you can email Duke Disability Alliance at duke.edu with any information that you want to send out, and we can get that sent. So yeah.
Okay, thank you guys. Maddie.
Yeah, so I'm intending to write an article about the mass incarceration of people with disabilities and look at the impact of the criminal justice system on people with disabilities. And I kind of chose this because I feel like when we talk about mass incarceration, it's usually centered around race, and while that is like a very significant factor and absolutely should be written about and talked about, I feel like the ability side of mass incarceration is often left down or kind of just not as dominant in the conversation as race is. So I wanted to write about like the skyrocketing imprisonment rates with of individuals with disabilities, and then talk about the problems that they face behind bars that kind of go unnoticed or fly under the radar. And then in terms of like dispersing the article, I can get it like published by The Standard, which is very available to like the Duke community. And they have like a Facebook following of a couple thousand people, and so they share it with that, and then like they also post it on like their Instagram. Like they share it through a bunch of different outlets, which would hopefully like increase its visibility. And in addition to that, like people share it like privately too. So I think that'd be a good way to spread it, but I'm open to other suggestions as well.
I have 2 suggestions for your research. There's a book called Disability Incarcerated. Edited by Liat Ben Mashi, and that's a must read for you. So I would check that out. I forget what my second thing was. Come back to me, other people.
I have a comment while you think, Marian.
Yeah.
So there's a headline came out, I think it was in November, so it was within the last 3 months, and it was actually reflecting on I guess deinstitutionalization, which is a key part of the story of mass incarceration. And it was connecting sort of the deinstitutionalization's impact on the lack of available resources for people with disabilities. I think it was trying to link that into the national conversation about mental health and gun laws. And so there's also some interesting, more popularized articles that come out of the volume that you mentioned about disability incarcerated. And I think, in fact, the author published one specifically about it has become a cliche to refer to prisons as the new asylum. And that's been the headline of various popular news articles. And then the author who you mentioned comes back around and wants to write a more historically informed piece saying that it's not precisely the right comparison. But all that to say that you can sort of trace an ongoing news dialogue about incarceration and asylums and deinstitutionalization in this larger context. So I'd love to share some of these shorter articles with you if that would be helpful.
That'd be great, thank you.
Yeah, and also real quick, I think perhaps Disability Rights NC or Matt Hare, if we can get in touch with him individually, they might also be a resource, because I know that Matt Hare has done some work like trying to, like, for I think juveniles not being prosecuted as adults. I think like a lot of a big part of that work was talking about.
What Jay is talking about is that, sorry Jay, you got cut off there. Matt Hare gave a talk here at Duke last fall. So part of his work has been looking at the rate of incarceration of juveniles, especially in the state of North Carolina, and how many of them were students with disabilities, especially like learning disabilities, stuff like that. And so he'd be someone that you might talk to. And my other point that I was gonna say at the beginning was that it'd be great if you could like tie in either a really current thing, like a really current news story, or something really local.
Yeah.
So like we talked in class.
Like Charlotte Observer that.
Yeah, we talked in class too about the Durham County Detention Center and how they just got this huge grant for mental health that they're using for just expanding the prison.
Right.
So that could be, it's a way to like really get the reader's interest. I think we should move to, we have so many people. Yeah, go ahead, Lauren.
So I was thinking that maybe you can talk to somebody in the Chronicle and see if you can maybe work with them and maybe publish it in the Chronicle.
Not the whole thing, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess we should talk to Olivia next, who's on the chat. If somebody's unmute you, okay.
Okay, so I am doing my project on the broad topic of refugee mental health, and a lot of people know about the trauma they suffer from, but not a lot of people know that once they come to the US or wherever they're resettled, whether that's Turkey or Germany or a variety of other places, they face a lot of mental health challenges, but it's not because of the trauma. It's because of the challenges they face in the country they're resettled in. So they have a hard time getting a job, or a hard time fitting in with their new culture, leaving their families behind, and just adjusting to a new life. And so I was originally thinking of doing a podcast, but I'm thinking now it might be better to do a series of op-eds, because I think it would still be interesting to cover refugee mental health and trauma, but then also cover mental health regarding statelessness, or the mental health while traveling to a new country and going through the process of resettling, and then doing a final op-ed on the challenges of life in a resettled country and what that looks like. I work closely with Suzanne Shanahan and Bill Tobin, and they have something called what do they call it? I think they just call it the Refugee Project. But it's a series of blog posts, so I still need to talk to her, but I'm hoping they would be willing to feature some of my posts. And then in addition, I'm trying to find some other sources where I could publish it, whether that be through social media, through DDA, or whatever that be, but I'm open to suggestions.
Just in terms of choosing between a podcast or a series of op-eds, I think if you had people to interview, a podcast might be better, right? So you hear the voice and like witness a conversation unfolding. But if you don't have anyone to interview, then the op-eds might be better, and it's also a great advantage that you have this possibility of publishing with the Refugee Project. So.
Yeah, I do work with refugees through the Citizenship Lab here. However, I think it may cross a line asking them for an interview, which is kind of why I'm leaning towards the op-eds right now.
Okay.
Yeah. So one thing and I realize we haven't really been addressing this with other people, but in terms of accessibility, if you do the podcast, you're gonna want to make sure that you have like a written out script of whatever was actually said in the podcast, that you have that written down. And then with that script, or with the op-ed, if you write that, you just have to make sure that wherever you're putting them is accessible. Like if they're online, or like if someone's going to be looking at them electronically, they need to be accessible with a screen reader. And so I think the best thing to do, if you get in touch with Nicole Stovall at SDAL, and this is for anyone, if you're like also with captioning for videos and stuff, if you get in touch with Nicole Stovall at duke.edu, so that's let me just I guess I can just spell it out, or we can write it in the agenda. Let's
we'll put it in the email that gets sent out this week.
Yeah. Oh yeah. We can do So we can do that. So basically, if you just contact this person, she's the one that helps coordinate like captioning and stuff. And with making it the op-ed accessible for a screen reader or the transcript, that should be free. The captioning, maybe not. So we may want to look at options like just like taking whatever script you have and then just like making that into captioning, or like if you have time to go through on your own and just like do the captioning yourself, like. But again, I think you can reach out to Nicole Stovall, and this is like again for the people that are doing the videos. You can still reach out to her and see what the options are, because I'm unfortunately not aware of exactly what options exist. So I think still reach out to her and then see. But so again, the screen reading stuff, the making it accessible for a screen reader would be free. The captioning maybe not.
Okay, so it's almost noon, so I wanna let Karina speak, and then we have 3 more people after that, so go ahead.
Okay, so I am doing something similar to what Olivia was saying. I'm gonna do a series of op-eds, and basically my focus is on education and children specifically in elementary school and how they're affected in school if they have a disability. So I have 5 different topics. I'm doing medication, bullying, class size, and if they should be included in the general classrooms, economics of the family, as well as just accessibility in general. So I'm using this website called Medium, and Dr. Q showed me it, and basically you could just, it sorts you by topics, and then you can post your own writing. And then I'm gonna like send it out in like a series of a couple days over a time span to kind of draw attention to it, which is a great suggestion. And I contacted someone at Duke Web Accessibility because I'm gonna try to see similarly if I could get a podcast, or maybe just even I might end up just linking a YouTube video of me reading it off just for heightened accessibility. And so I definitely take a stance in each of my articles, so I think that's kind of why it's like an op-ed type thing. So yeah, very similar to this.
So who would be your primary audience in this?
I think that what I'm going to do with the audience, I'm going to target like parents, teachers, kids that have gone through the schooling system. I'm going to try to do like that, and because of the Medium, I'll probably just end up sharing it on Facebook. That's the most I can do, but otherwise Medium, tons of people subscribe based on their likes and interests, so I think from there it'll go far.
You can do each article on Medium, you give it like 5 hashtags.
Right.
And you just pick the ones that have like the most followers on them, like the ones
Correct.
that obviously apply to your project.
Yeah.
So it's a great space to get some attention. Right, we have Sydney and Anisha as well, so Sydney and also Kate. Okay, so let's start with Sydney.
Okay, so my project is kind of revolving around the idea of trauma-informed care. And so what I'm looking at doing is essentially taking, like, not even necessarily like a full session, but like taking like people and having them like the idea was like using kind of social media. So like even like I thought of like a like hashtag like comfort. So like see like or like essentially like caring of the masses for understanding and responding to trauma or something like that, something along those lines. And so like having people like understand that like they're not alone, and that I think it's something around like 60% of people like experience trauma by the time like they're like 16 or something like that. And so like just making it like normalizing it and like making people like aware that like they're not alone and that there's other people and like they're supported, and like that there are also and also like trying to like create like a kind of a movement where those people are able to come together and like kind of really activate or really try to like get more like trauma informed care in like institutions, particularly around Duke, and making sure that like our different like I guess just like places around campus are very like trauma informed. And so like the idea is like maybe like having people like paint like on like rocks, even like hashtag like comfort, or like, and then like on the back of it like write something that even like for them particularly implies, like speaks. So like whether that be like writing like the type of trauma they experienced, or like not alone, or like writing like just something that means something to them, and then passing that on, so that like you kind of create like this like movement almost, and that like people are able to like come together. And then also like I was thinking of creating, okay, I thought I created this infographic, but I think I might have lost it, which is very sad because it like took me like hours to do. But like yeah, so I might have to recreate that, but like sharing that on like social media, and then like going and taking, I guess, like people and trying to get them to like spread, like even having some of these rocks maybe, and like paints or like something available at like different like places, whether like be like Duke Reach or like other places, you know. And so that like, and I know you guys are talking about a center for like mental health and like disability, and like maybe having like some there that people can like see like examples that have been done and like make their own and like pass it on. So yeah.
So is it like an event that you want to organize in which people are writing and sharing experiences? Like, is this something that you would be leading?
Yeah, I'd like to like ideally have like a session in which like that is done. But I also like don't want it to like stop there. One that's kind of like spearhead it maybe, but then like the overall like thing like that's good, and I want it to like start discussion, like all that, and like get it moving and kickstart it. But like the big like focal point in a sense like is to like just have this like kind of like continue and like continuously like activate for like, or what's that right word, like for like mental like trauma informed care and all that sort of thing.
I should let you know as well, thanks for being here, that we're having a lecturer come to speak about trauma informed care on the 26th of March. So it's like at the end, it's during Disability Pride Week, so it's not, but the speaker's named Kevin Ann Huckshorn, so you might want to like look her up and find out about her work. She's really fantastic. So.
Okay.
Okay, see you, Sarah. Thanks for being here. Feedback for Sydney? Any ideas or questions?
And like if that's like a session, then maybe being able to like have some of like the information, like if I make like a pamphlet or like and like maybe having like some of the rocks or like whatever as like a little like off shoot of like maybe like wherever like that session's being held where she's talking. Mm-hmm. So like then like that could be kind of like a gateway into getting people who are like being maybe inspired by her to like
yeah. You definitely use it as a place to advertise your project.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, Kate.
Okay, so I'm doing a blog about disability representation in film and TV. And I'll also make recordings so it's more accessible. And so I'm mainly looking at like representations that are not like more current, first of all, and also aren't like blatantly like horrible representations, but when you look at them kind of more carefully, it's clearly lacking like a first person narrative or like that perspective. Yeah. So like I'm looking at like Parenthood, for example, that's like a lot of people look to that as like a really good representation, but it's kind of lacking firsthand, I don't know, perspective. So I'm also, a lot of like the conversations about this happen in like IMDb like comment sections and stuff. So I'm making accounts on those kinds of websites, and then I'm gonna kind of share my blog there or copy and paste my posts there. But I'm very open to suggestions about how to kind of incorporate this into Disability Pride Week, because I was like, I don't know, posters or how to kind of get that message to be a part of the week here, since my audience is kind of broader than just the Duke community. So, thoughts?
Just thinking in terms of right now, how people are loving Black Panther so much because of its all Black cast. Like, I guess
I don't know, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, like, the positives, like, the way they executed that, like, did people find it good? Was there something lacking that they could have done better? And maybe just drawing some parallels as to, like, how that can be done for people with disabilities, you know, because it's, like, how minorities are being represented in film. It's a very up and coming, like, kind of process, I guess. So maybe just using that to kind of trampoline off of maybe something else.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Deepthi. And yeah, I guess when I used the word screen readers earlier, did everyone know what that meant? It doesn't mean like necessarily making a recording of whatever's being said. It means just making sure that the software that is available to read text on the web and on your computer can read those.
Okay.
So again, we'll be sending out information like contacts for people. But yeah, I just wanted to clarify that just in case there was any misunderstanding. This does really sound like a great idea though, so I'm excited to see how it turns out. And we have that event on the 31st where we're going to have Carrie Sandal here, and she's going to be screening parts of a film about disability representation in Hollywood. So I think it would definitely be great if you could come to that. I don't know if there's any other way we can kind of like
I don't know.
have the two build off of each other in some way.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I don't know, Marion, if you have any thoughts about that.
About incorporating it. I mean, it's like I said, the exhibition that I'm hoping to be able to put on, I'm hoping that other students can just like have a station where they can sit and talk to participants about their project and their work, just to have that opportunity to kind of have a physical, embodied component of what you're sharing online. So Anisha, do you wanna?
Yeah, I'll do it really quickly. So my project is kind of undergoing some changes. So the core of my project is basically a photo series, kind of similar to Humans of New York, but for Duke. I thought it would be really interesting to showcase kind of the diversity of opinions and experiences of people with mental health and mental illness, like in the broader Duke community. But I'm thinking that I want to get a lot more specific with the population that I'm choosing. And one of the populations that I'm interested in talking about is the Pan-Hellenic community at Duke, so people who are involved in Greek sororities and kind of their experiences with mental health, like throughout the rush process, and then also like people who are initiated in sororities, how they have experienced or heard of other people experiencing mental health issues. And then another thing that I was thinking about doing was that it would be really interesting to talk to Pan-Hellenic exec and see if there could be some kind of mental health like training incorporated for the people who are facilitating sorority rush. So every person who's rushing a sorority has like they're called Gamma Chis, which are like the people who are upperclassmen and they help you through the rush process. And I think that there are a lot of improvements that can be made to how like that interaction occurs, and like I think they can be a lot more supportive of people who are thinking of like dropping out, or like especially like women of color, for example, going through the rush process. So I think that like doing a photo series, maybe like highlighting different people's experiences in sororities or coming into sororities could be a really interesting resource to distribute to people who want to rush in the future.
That's really interesting. So how are you going to get this message? Because like an image alone of someone doing a sorority, like if we have no context, like how do we know they're focusing on mental health? Is there going to be like
I think
language accompanying the pictures?
Yeah, so I'm going to do interviews with people like about mental health, and then I'm thinking like they can hold up like a whiteboard, like I'm thinking not showing faces, but like a whiteboard with like a quote, for example, of like something representative of their experience, and then creating like a blog of those. Like I was thinking of an Instagram or like creating like a Facebook with a lot of
I like the Humans in New York idea because like that blog is really cool. So, I mean, that kind of style can really like get the message, like just a really specific message.
The thing about Greek life though is that a lot of people end up dropping Rush, right? So don't even end up like affiliating with any type of organization. So if it's possible for you to get like a list of names of people who are like at like the first day of recruitment,
right?
And like
I was thinking, I have I know some people who have like were through like going through the rush experience and then dropped, and I think that would be like a also really important population to talk to. So I think I can like communicate with Panhell. I like don't know about like the confidentiality of that. Like maybe they might not want to release like names to me, but I think I can also like if I can get Panhell to like publish that I'm doing this, and then hopefully people could come forward regardless of their like affiliation. I think that would be like a good non like pressuring way to do it.
You can also post on the Facebook groups and just say like, DM me if you're interested in sharing or something.
And make sure too that everyone who participates, especially people who are gonna have their face as part of this, have consented to it.
That's
So you
okay.
might
I
need
think I'm gonna do faces.
Oh, okay.
I think it's gonna be like I just don't want to like maybe like affiliate like certain quotes with like a sorority. Like I don't think I want to specify anything like that.
More of a cultural exploration. Yeah. Okay.
And I think one important thing would be to highlight like how much value people put into being part of a sorority, like what community, just to kind of get a point across of like what it's like to not be able to be part of the community. And like if you don't want to confine yourself just to Greek life and even SLG rush too, like there are a lot of people who rush SLGs and like don't get in, and like it affects them, and it affects them in like. And some people want to talk about it and some people don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, and sorry. Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think that's a really good idea, especially because having been on the other side of Rush this year, there's been an unprecedented percentage of people dropping out, especially this year. So I think it's good that you're trying to open this communication between like people who might just have stereotypes about Greek life, people who have tried and dropped out, or people who have tried and are in it. And so I think that's a really good idea. So I wanted to commend you on that.
So I think, yeah, it's an awesome idea. And a lot of times people talk about, I mean, I've heard conversations about mental health in the rush process, but a lot of times you don't ever hear anything about like post-rush. So it's a good idea that you're focusing on that, but also maybe like, you know, asking Duke to like post-rush, like ramp up their mental health or...
I was thinking, like, one of the ideas that I had is that, like, Gamma Chi's help you through the rush process, but then they kind of go away at, like, if you drop or, like, once you get into a sorority. So I thought it would be really interesting for, like, that little group that you have during rush to maybe, like, have some kind of follow-up after, just so, like, everybody can stay in touch and maybe, like, they can continue to help as you transition. Because I think the transition period is especially something that, like, a lot of people don't think about. Like, everybody, like, thinks about rush being, like, the worst. But I think that like there's a lot of like help that could be needed after.
And a lot of it also has to do with the fact like independent housing, like people may prefer that, but also it's like a commonly accepted fact that there's just not as much community in like independent houses as there is in like SLGs or sororities.
Right.
And some senior like RAs and DSG members are trying to like basically revamp independent housing entirely. So if you want to talk to Sarah Jacobs or Sabria, they might be good if you want to get that community perspective.
Okay, that's everybody's project.
And so, sorry, just real quick for the images, you just want to make sure that each image you have, you just want to say like what the text is on the whiteboard and anything else.
Right, image descriptions out. Yeah, you can do them as audio recordings or just as image descriptions that can be read by a screen reader. So that's all I need to do for accessibility. Okay, cool. Well, for my students, thank you for being here and thanks for staying past noon. And I guess you guys can go. Thank you so much for sharing your projects. Yeah.
So I think
on a couple things before we leave.
Yeah, so I think we'll want to keep the broadcast going because I know we don't have Trent here. So we want to make sure he can see as much as possible. I know we have to vacate the room like now.
Be there, so let's wait to see.
We have to. You're chilling in your dang apartment. Eating food on Skype.
Okay, let's see. So we need to do the contracts.
Yes, I have a list of things that I still need in order to be able to fill out the contract cover forms. So can I go over those quickly right now, or is there something else that you wanted to say?
Actually, so hold on. Sorry, I'm just trying to make sure that we can get this all done efficiently.
Okay.
Who has to leave first?
We're good.
I have to leave kind of quickly.
Okay, so Deepthi, so what we had talked about earlier before the meeting itself is that what we want to do before we have to apply for funding again based on the meeting yesterday that the ASL interpreter cost is going to be higher than we thought. So we're going to need to reapply for funding, but we'll need to draft
I
an
was at the
email.
sponsor meeting yesterday, and I also just read through Barbara Barnes' proposal. So I just wanted to ask, like, is appealing to SOFC for funding again possible? Like, would they be receptive to that? Or?
So there is a process for it, and they didn't set a deadline for it. So I'm just going to try it and see what happens. But yeah, so I think what we wanted to do was if you could just email SDAO again and just kind of set up like what our understanding of the budget is and get them to confirm that. So basically it would be like 2 regular ASL interpreters times 4 hours for the event times $75 per hour, and then 2 deaf and blind interpreters for Antoine Hunter times 5 hours, 11:30 to 4:30 times the 112.5 per hour rate. So we'll just so if we can just get that drafted and if you can send that out, do you think you'd be able to do that by Monday?
Can I just revisit the math on that for a second? So the email from Nikki to DT yesterday said they are paid at a higher rate of $75 per hour, which during non-standard hours would come out to $112.50 per hour.
Yeah, but we won't need them during non-standard hours because Miss Simon got back to me that
I thought the whole weekend was non-standard hours. Like weekend hours are non-standard hours. I thought that's what that meant, right? Because this is not a weekday, the whole event is $112.50 per hour. That's how I'm reading this. I think we should check what non-standard hours means.
Yeah.
Because I know like we don't need interpreters outside of the event itself, thankfully, but we need to, I thought non-standard meant weekend. So I think we might have to even do more money than you thought.
What did Sana Simon say about?
I asked her if Mr. Hunter would need like an ASL interpreter like from when he lands to when he leaves. But they said no, we just need one at the event itself, so that's also
right. And when Lee was talking about it, I thought non-standard just meant weekend. Yeah. So that would mean that the actual rate is $112.50 per hour
for everybody. Oh yeah, so then it gets above 2,000.
Right. So I think we need to make sure what non-standard hours means, but I'm pretty sure it means weekend, so that should be the math that we calculate.
Okay, so let's calculate with that math, and then once we can draft that and send that, and so
it's a total of 4 people for $112.50 per hour, and it's 4 hours.
16,
right.
16 times 112.
Yeah. So 4 hours. So 2 people for 4 hours for the event, and then 2 other people for 5 hours for Antoine.
Oh, 4 and 5.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, if we can, if you can just get that drafted in the email drafts maybe this weekend, and then we can send that out, but like by Monday, like before Monday morning or something.
Which email, like just Stovall?
Yeah. Sorry. So just email Nicole Stovall, and then with that math in there, so basically we'll come up with an estimated cost for the interpreters, and then have her confirm that. And then have her also confirm what non-standard hours are. And then once we're on the same page with her, then we can go and appeal the funding.
I just wrote up an email right now to her asking her like what non-standard hours we mean. Mm-hmm. So I can just send that right now and.
All right. Yeah. And then I think hold on, let me just pull that up real quick if I can.
Right. Okay. So that's in terms of the financials, right? We need to definitely ask for more for that. Was there anything else we needed more money for?
Barbara Barnes.
Oh yeah. Okay.
So one thing we could do is if we can negotiate a lower cost for the food, either by finding a new vendor or something, and then we'll be able to free up more of the funding that we're already getting from sponsors to go towards.
I will also say that it seemed pretty clear to me in the meeting yesterday that FSP and HHL are both willing to increase their donations to us. I just think that we would need to kind of like have meetings with them and just kind of talk to them about what we need, and they'll just be okay, like here, we can give you a little bit more.
But how much is a little bit then?
I don't know, but they just both seem to like, when Eliza was in the meeting and was suggesting that $800, what was it, an $800 thing? She was like, oh, if you pay $800 to the radio station, they'll, do an ad for your event and all that stuff. And it felt to me like she was saying FSP will help with that. You know what I mean? So like, I think that actually, and I was gonna email Kathy about this, I think that Kathy and I should have a meeting with Eliza, like this week, hopefully, like maybe the end of this week, 'cause this week is crazy for me, but maybe Thursday or Friday would be better. I don't know what your schedule is, Kathy, but this is somebody who is just so experienced with event planning at Duke in particular. Like she's the person who put up the Invisible Wounds series last year. So she made that website, everything was gorgeous, all the advertising and so many different bodies. She knows everyone. So I feel like we should just talk to her and she'll give us like a very clear like to-do list of like people to contact. And I think it would just simplify our process. And she's one of our co-sponsors because she's with the Forum for Scholars in Public. So I just think that would be a good strategy move for us as like our next step. And I think it would help too in your training as event coordination chair to meet and talk to somebody who's such a phenomenal resource and who has such like good experience of being a successful event planner.
Wow. I think that sounds great. And I think Thursday and Friday would probably be better. Thursday I have a lot of classes, so I don't know, like during the day probably won't be possible, and in the evenings on both days.
So I'll email you and we'll figure out a time and then we'll just write to Eliza.
Yes, that'd be great.
We can meet.
And then so you guys will also be able to kind of ask about the additional funding as well in that meeting?
Yeah, I mean, what we'll need to kind of know like what we need it for, but like I'm sure we can just ask her, since it'll be in a more private setting, like how much more would FSP be able to donate?
I mean, because basically once we calculate the math on the interpreters, I mean, I can even let me just do that now.
I think that the way that it makes sense to me is that when you're asking a sponsor for money, you kind of tell them how you're going to use it for something that appeals to them and their mission, So like it might, since they're FSP, it might make sense to talk about how, this is going to be for community engagement and, public participation,
Right.
And so we can talk about how we're reaching out to disabled communities in the area, through various connections, and that we want people with disabilities to be able to participate in this event, and that's not just Duke people. So, if we want to use some of their funding to put towards ASL, that's the way we would sell that,
Right. Great. Yeah. So it does come to like 2025, I think, when you do the math on that. So, yeah, I think that's definitely a great way to frame it, though. So if you can discuss that with her, that'd be great. I think so. It looks like we'll still want to go through the appeal process if possible, and see how that works out. Because they might even tell us, no, you're too late, you can't appeal anymore. Because they didn't give a deadline. They weren't very clear about that. So.
But it was a week ago, right?
Yeah. So now it's been just over a week, I think, since we got that approval from SFC. So we should still be able to do it. But so once we have confirmation from SDO, I can send that to Jackson Dellinger. Yes. So that's good. Who has to leave? So
we just saw somebody check the room, so we might need to clear out.
Okay. Okay. So Kathy, you and I can talk about the contracts because neither of us are there. So
Yeah.
we don't have to worry, I think. But Kevin, we do want to be working on flyers soon. Maybe as you're walking out, you can talk with Marion about that. Would that be doable?
To talk about it, sure.
Yeah, the flyers, right? Yeah, I feel like it'd be great to have like a press release, like written just like with that description of our event and like an image. And I know that we've asked Antoine for images of himself dancing, like stuff that he'd want to use. I don't know if he sent it to us yet. Do you know? If anyone, he's been in touch with Deep T, so she would have been the person to ask.
I think you'll want to go back through and I think he did send something, so you might just want to go back through and check Kevin or.
Okay, so yeah, like images of him, and I've asked Carrie for images as well, and I haven't gotten them yet. But I think that it's like that should be something we work on this week, is like having the press release like ready so that we can just send it to all. Because like yesterday in the sponsor meeting, we talked about like 100 different places that we can plug in to advertise, and we just don't have anything to share yet. Did you forget something?
No, my lanyard and my ID.
Oh no.
It's the same, so I'm like retracing my steps everywhere.
Did she
Did Lourdes maybe have it?
Oh,
or
I
is it just that?
texted her, but she said
Oh.
she didn't see it.
Okay, sorry. See you later.
Yeah, I mean, I can help work on the flyers. I have literally no idea how to make a flyer, so I'm probably the worst person to ask.
Does
but I can
anyone
help.
on exec have skills with
Well, I've done them before. I think the reason I was thinking about Kevin is that we have that in the Constitution, as Kevin is the one that's doing the marketing.
Well, it's not that, I mean, I've made flyers before with no skills and no training. You can, there's different, like you can use Adobe, right? You can, what software do you use? Right?
Or Canva, like when I.
So it might be good then to do a partnership between someone who's done it before. And so I have made flyers. Usually it takes far longer than I think it should, and there's a lot of cursing involved. So like I think I just didn't have, right, I know, but it's also like I don't have once I graduated out as a student and had switched to a instructor role, I didn't feel like fronting out the cash for an Adobe account, even though all of that software is technically freely available on Duke computers. But Adobe is, I think, much easier for manipulating things. You can have the Photoshop software. But I've also been able to do it through Microsoft Word and a couple different options. I just think that it can be daunting if you have to familiarize yourself. And so partnering up with someone who has done it more successfully might be a good idea. So I could share how I've done it with Word to varying degrees of success. Maybe we could pool that knowledge.
I don't know, I think it'd be great if people working on the flyer could get together sometime the next few days. Like, I know it's like right now, but I just like feel like it's a month out from the event at this point, and we have so many people that we need to be advertising to and generating awareness with, that it'd be great to have it like by the end of the week, you know? So, and I don't know if there's.
Are these flyers for the whole
For the arts, just for the arts.
Just the arts.
Yeah, because that's our big like
Crowding.
trying to, yeah, that's our jewel, right?
Yeah, yeah.
The stuff that we work on for just the whole week of disability prep, we can do that in March, which is soon. But this is like, yeah, the next thing that has to happen, I think, in addition to the contracts, so.
Yeah, all right. So Kevin and Ashley, will you guys be able to meet up or this week, or should we work on another option?
I can do that if Kevin is able to. And one thing I can recommend is that just to start now on like form versus copy, like like knowing what goes into it, we can collect in advance before you even get things like images. So right now I can start a Google Doc that just collects that information that will go in, and others can help me proof it to be sure it's accurate, and that way it will make the process go quicker.
Yeah, I should have time to look at that.
I can meet up to help make the flyer, but like I'm gonna be useless. It's gonna be just me learning. So if you wanna like just have it as like a teaching me how to do a thing, then like by all means.
Yeah,
So the things we're gonna need other flyers for the week.
Right.
For the week. So Kevin, if you learn now, you can do the other ones later. So it's still helpful.
Okay.
Okay, I see the value in
Slow
that.
down the process.
I don't know if that's possible with the way I work, Kevin. I go pretty slowly already. No, I just didn't really sell that task very well, did I? Made it sound awful, but I have to be honest because my partner's here listening and he's the one who has to put up with all my cursing when I'm yelling at the computer. Anyway, I'll do that in a private message to you, Kevin. We can figure out what's the smartest way to go about that for immediate needs versus long-term sustainability.
Sounds good.
Thanks guys for doing that. I really appreciate that everyone is able to distribute the tasks and take on different stuff. So thank you.
We're doing good.
All right. So I think me and Abby, you and I can just talk about the contacts, and then we can get everything edited, and then everyone can just review them once we're done editing them. Does that sound good?
Yep.
All right. So I think everyone else can leave unless like you want to stay for this part. Because did you say that there was someone else looking at the room or something?
They're gone. I think we're fine, but.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So let's see here.
Okay, I gotta head out, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Okay then. Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks for
Bye, Kevin.
Yeah.
I'll stop the broadcast then, I guess.
I don't know if I can help at all. Like once Wednesday is over with my lecture that I'm doing, which we forgot to talk about here, I'll be a lot more relaxed, so I can help out too at that point. Yeah. I don't have any skills either, but
yeah, I mean, if it's just the thing, it's trying to get it out quick,
Right.
and it's like,
Yeah.
don't want me involved, but long term, I'm happy to do that, like by all means.
Okay.
Also, we should figure out what to do about Emily Stewart since we didn't.
I know. Yeah, we
And I didn't get
we should.
email until.
We should. It's okay. No, it's okay. I think that we should just make a meeting with her on our own, maybe, and I can attend like anything after Wednesday. Like I said, I can go with you, meet with her, and just talk about the event. If you like, do you like already have like a friendship or like relationship?
Yeah. So I worked with them at the Red Center.
Cool. Well, I would be so happy to like go with you for a separate meeting with her, so that she feels involved in the process. Because just one of those things where when working in a team, sometimes it's a blessing and a curse, right? Where I think we had a list of people to invite to that, and it just someone didn't get included, and then like I didn't check who was on the email, and it just was out. And
do we still need the cord in there, or are we done with that?
Yeah,
the
we're done.
cable?
We're putting it up.
Alright.
Your dad's here getting it now.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jay.
Okay, so
Thanks,
do you,
Mr.
I'm just thinking about how, because we should email her.
Yeah.
And I think if I email her, it'll look bad.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Because
No, I
it'll be
will.
like, either you or just someone else, maybe Jay or something.
No.
Yeah,
Because if
yeah.
I email her and it looks like
Yeah, sure.
it's separate and didn't include her in the first time.
Right. Well, we don't have to mention that we already had a sponsor meeting. I don't think that needs to be
Part of it, it's like we can just make it, so we're meeting.
Okay, yeah. Then it doesn't matter.
There's no reason for her to need to know that. Yeah, it's just like, we'd love to meet with you to talk about our vision for the. Let's take it back, but to talk about our vision for the event and to include like your ideas on best ways to promote it and record it, whatever.
Yeah, totally.
She's Office of Civic Engagement, right?
No, Emily Stewart's
Human Rights, okay. Human Rights, Civic Engagement was the one that is not giving us any funding, but Human Rights is giving us funding, so we should definitely
I think they already gave it.
Yeah, do they already like transfer?
They reached out to that person who was supposed to handle it, so I think.
Yes, sir, okay, cool.
So yeah. I'll get back. Just get a list of transactions again for that, so we can check back on that. Yeah.
Jay?
Okay. All right, Jay.
All right. Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate it. Thanks, Mary.
Yeah, we'll see ya.